About it.
You know what? Once there was this guy.
He's taking a video.
Okay, so once,
canvas. They were doing a lot of training with the white man at this point in time. So the clothing, the living habits were starting to be very white. So you see some canvas on there. You see ladies, children, I mean women, children, and older men that couldn't stand the rigors of going out hunting. The work of cooking, making clothes and so on. And the daily life would start at sun up and end at sundown. And that was pretty well the same in the Americans as well. You would get up when the sun, so you'd rest up and go to bed. Something's happening here on the field. Those are American Dragoons and Kentucky Light Dragoons. The Americans were wearing the blue tunics. The Kentucky Light Dragoons are wearing the hunting frocks with the red fringes. And they've mounted an attack against the Indian village. Dragoon merely means light cavalry. So they could move quickly. They didn't have a lot of armor or heavy accoutrements, helmets. But the Americans have designed a uniform that's very functional. The Kentucky Dragoons, which are attacking the camp right now, are wearing a linen or a cotton frock with multi-capes. And in a day like today, when it's raining, the multi-layers wouldn't get wet as fast as a single layer of material. The fringe helps the water to drop off. Now the regular soldiers, states, were angry at the Americans for pushing them further and further west. The British told them that if they would help them, they would give them their own land from the Great Lakes south to the Ohio River, and of course everything on the other side of the Mississippi. So that was a big bonus for the Indians to become part of the British move. That was an experimental force in 1812. They were riflemen. The main weapon for the soldier in this time period was basically a shot set way back because they were rifled barrels and they could pick off their enemy from a distance. Now you're noticing all the smoke over there. In certain battles in this time period, they would call off the battle because they couldn't see each other. Another thing that happened with this, they won't be able to go bang, and they will look at you and say bye-bye. The American command quickly there, the American Army, on the far left, blue tunics, regular soldiers. In the middle, hunting frocks, militia. And those are militia coming out the other side. Now the pretty guys there with blue, gold ribbon across their chest, red collars and cuffs, United States Marine Corps. And of course, can touch somebody with the rifles. Now over to your left, the British have seen fit to bring up some artillery, and the thing you just heard firing was called a mortar. Hollywood has told you that most American armies fought like Daniel Boone or Davy Crockett up in trees. That is historically inaccurate. You can see that the Americans are forming a line. This type of battle, which started in the 1700s and went right up to the end of the 1800s in the American Civil War, is known as Napoleonic War. So you line your soldiers up shoulder to shoulder, and you fire all at once, and that sends a wall of lead towards your enemy. The soldiers did the British Army forming up on your left. And if you look at the two gentlemen coming out close to you in green uniforms, that was the British version of the riflemen. There's been some famous stories on TV now about Sharps rifles. This is what they would have looked like. They would have wore green tunics, and they would have worked in pairs, and it's used basically to pick off the officers, then you wouldn't have anybody giving commands. Now, if you look at the British soldiers, you'll see they're all wearing red tunics, but the collars and the cuffs are all different colors. That's the way you tell the different regiments. The fellows on the far left have blue collars and cuffs, and their nickname is the King's Regiment, and there's where you get the term Royal Blue, because they're wearing blue collars and cuffs. The fellows in the middle wearing the kilts are the 93rd Regiment of Foot. These are the guys that fought at the Battle of New Orleans. That was the only battle they didn't wear kilts in. That was the only battle they didn't win. That regiment wore kilts in WW2. So now that the armies are actually on the field, it'll become a chess game on who can outflank or push the other guys back. So if they'd have had TV like they do today, or an audience, it would be very, very unexciting to watch Napoleonic warfare. And 48 that were with them, and they were trained. The officer noticed that the cavalry was going to attack the British line. Now the cavalry is equal to tanks today. They can move very quickly, they can get in and they can get out. So the only way to protect these men is to form square. So that means you have 4 different lines, and then the horses could not get in. Now the British Army Foreign Lodge, it consisted of Indians, First Nation people, free trappers, men of color, runaway slaves, and employees of the Hudson's Bay Company, the Northwest Company, and they would come under the command of a British officer from the Indian Department. But all those orders would be filtered down by means of a war chief. And you can see the war chief pacing back and forth, telling his warriors where he needs the most gunfire. Now this is a maneuver called outflanking. What they're trying to do is get to the side of that American line. If they get there, they'll be able to shoot right down. But The American officer has seen what's happening, and he's turning that line. And you can see what happens when the cavalry comes up against the British. They'll form the square, and it's a protection against those horses. Now, in the actual Battle of Mississinewa, there were no British. There were just American mounted troops and the native warriors. So this is not what the battle would have looked like. But this is a typical battle that was fought in North America using native braves, British soldiers, and the American soldiers. Now, contrary to popular belief, the United States Army had a number of Indian warriors fighting on their side as well. Now you see some British officers, and they're wearing a hat that looks like a shark fin. That's called a chapeau bras, and that was a special design, actually a French design, and you'll notice a lot of pictures of Napoleon wearing that same style of hat, but he wears it sideways because it's a little different version. The reason the British officer wears that hat is so he is actually identifiable on the field. There's a case where the 93rd Regiment of Foot actually marched on the battlefield in New Orleans. The officers were killed, and they stood there waiting for commands and were decimated because the British soldier was not allowed to think. He was only allowed to follow orders. Now, on the American side, they were voting for officers, and if they didn't like them, they'd actually vote him out. So the Republic was working at that point in time. Now the tunic I'm wearing is all blue, and that is late war. That's 1813 and 14, because due to the British blockades on the seaports, they couldn't get red wool. So they decided to go to the blue wool. Now early war, the design of the American uniform was blue with red collars and cuffs, similar to the Marines out there, only they had white ribbon or tape or lace along the side. Each soldier carries a cotton or linen bag on his hip. That's actually his pantry. He was supposed to carry... Now, for those of you in the States to be born, and this one that you're watching in 1812 actually did absolutely nothing. If you read a Canadian history book, a few indecisive battles were fought in the South, and of course the British won the War of 1812 at Queenston Heights. If you read an American history book, few indecisive battles in the north, and of course the Americans won the War of 1812 at New Orleans. In fact, the only people who lost the War of 1812 were the natives. In front of you, for a march past, is the United States Army, 1812, consisting of the 1st U.S. Rifles, Indiana Company, Michigan Company, 6th U.S. Infantry, 7th U.S. Infantry, 19th U.S. Infantry, 25th U.S. Infantry, United States Marines, 1st U.S. Dragoons, Kentucky Mounted Volunteers, 1st Artillery, 2nd Artillery, U.S. Brig Niagara, 17 Illinois Rangers, Clark's Company Militia, Kentucky Militia, Missouri Rangers, Ohio Volunteers, Tennessee Militia, under the command of Steve Abel from Virginia. If you have any questions, just go over to the American camp.
Sectional sections!
Mike Sippen is leading the Mississinewa Indians, ladies and gentlemen. How about a great big hand for the stars of the show? Mike has ran all the way from Wisconsin to perform for you today, ladies and gentlemen. You also see a lady coming across the field. She's bringing supper with her. She's a war chief's wife, sir. She is a lady. Once again, thank you very much for attending Mississinewa 1812. If you enjoyed.
I use all mine. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of intensely watching Randy there.
Yeah, because I'm cutting up ham.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Louie. Louie. You just can't decide. The ham is more important.
Nutty soupy mess.
What are you talking
Have any fresh straw? Fresh straw.
You sure they're public?